did that. I came to the podium and read that out. From Monday, the 1st of January through Wednesday, the 3rd, the National Security Advisor, his deputy, Middle East Coordinator Brett McGurk spoke repeatedly with their counterparts in multiple foreign capitals to secure the support for that joint statement. Senior NSC officials coordinated hour by hour with senior Pentagon officials who are also making phone calls and securing support from foreign partners. The President's final approval on that statement happened shortly thereafter, and as you know, it was issued on the 3rd of January. Also on the 3rd, there was a Principals Committee meeting on Haiti. And neither Secretary Austin nor General Brown attended. They were represented by deputies. That is not uncommon that at a Principals Committee meeting, for whatever reason, the principal may not be able to attend.
Okay, thank you for all the detail on that. But more broadly, why should we believe anything that this administration tells us about anything ever again?
I think we all recognize, and I think the Pentagon has been very, very honest with themselves about the challenge to credibility by what has transpired here, and by how hard it was for them to be fully transparent with the American people. I think we all recognize that. And wait, now just give me a second now. I know you got another one coming here, but we all recognize that this didn't unfold the way it should have on so many levels, not just the notification process up the chain of command, but the transparency issues. We all recognize that, and I think we all want to make sure we learn from that. It's up to you and your colleagues, and it's up to the American people to determine, you know, how much they're going to ascribe what happened here to our credibility on every single issue. But in every way, Secretary Austin has been an exceptional defense secretary, and he still has the full faith and confidence of the commander-in-chief. He has led the department at an incredibly dangerous time for our national security interests and those of our allies and partners.
But if the administration is going to go to such great lengths to keep secrets about the defense secretary's health, how can anybody be certain that the administration would not go to the same lengths to keep secret problems with President Biden's health in the future?
If you could logically argue, and you can't, but if you could logically argue that
He's 81 years old.
Wait a second. Just give me a second here, bub. I'll get there. If the administration made some sort of Machiavellian effort across the board to keep this from getting public, then I think your question has merit. And certainly is a fair one. I don't think it's a fair one because that's not what happened here, Peter. What happened here is the Secretary of Defense, for whatever reason, I can't answer the question why, that information wasn't shared. It wasn't shared widely in the department, and it certainly wasn't shared with the interagency. It's not good. It's certainly not good, which is why, again, we want to learn from this. We want to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
We got to go around here. Gotcha.
Given that this was suboptimal, as you said, and given the commitment to transparency that the administration has, how do you square that with the confidence that the President expresses in the Secretary?
The President respects that he took full responsibility for it in his statement. That makes a difference. And he also respects the work that Secretary Austin has done on a range of issues since he has become Secretary of Defense. Whether that's helping lead the world in support for Ukraine, it was Secretary Austin's idea to come up with the Ukraine Contact Group. Whether that's support to Israel, making sure that they can defend themselves against Hamas. Look at everything that the Secretary's done in the Indo-Pacific. Do you think it was by accident that the Philippines agreed to let the United States military have additional access to bases there? No, that was the hard work of the Defense Secretary. I could go on and on and on. He's confident in Secretary Austin's ability to lead in the future because he has seen how well he has led in the past.
The Secretary, I have a question. You just said a moment ago that you don't know why the information was not relayed. Has it been privately conveyed to you all about why it was not relayed?
We have certainly made it clear that we would like to learn more about the information flow process.
And have you received any clarification on that?
I'm not at liberty to disclose any. I'm not aware that there has been any, any details provided as a result of the why the information was so siloed, but we obviously have conveyed our interest in learning more.
And then on a separate topic, on the Middle East, Israel's Supreme Court rejected a request from international news outlets to allow foreign journalists Many of us probably here in the newsroom here have colleagues who wanted to be able to get in. That request was rejected. I'm curious if ever in conversations with the Israeli officials that you all have been in touch with, have requests for media access ever been made?
That is a great question I don't have an answer to, but I'll tell you what, I'll go back and take a look at that. I'm not aware that there have been requests made by outlets and denied by the Israeli government to get into Gaza. Is that what you're saying?
Israeli Supreme Court. And there was
They
a
have said
coalition
no.
of international news
Okay. Let me go back and do some research on that, if you don't mind.
And then can I just, one other question. I know Secretary Blinken had a series of meetings in Israel today. Were there any tangible results from the Secretary's meetings today that were received? I know the readouts provided very limited information.
Readouts don't provide limited
Yes, so
information.
can you give us any
They provide
sense of
zero.
tangible results? Well, I guess that this has led to the
James
fact that,
helping you out here.
my colleagues on the ground had
I know.
presented the fact that the death toll over the last 24 hours was amongst one of the most deadly days in Israel. And so given that and given the Secretary's visit, and I know civilian casualty deaths were a part of this, do you all feel like you've gotten any tangible results?
I think Secretary Blinken's still on the trip, so I think we're going to let him finish his trip. I'm sure he will provide a robust readout to us of what he discussed and what he learned, and we'll look forward to that report when he gets back to Washington, D.C. But I don't want to get in step on his toes while he's still in the region, and certainly the question really is much better put to my colleague at the State Department to speak to.
Gotta start wrapping it up. Go ahead, Anita.
Thank you so much, Sean. Starting with Israel and President Biden's words yesterday that he was quietly working with Israel. Is he signaling, with these words, is he signaling for a ceasefire? And does the administration still support Israel's position that a ceasefire can only be possible if Hamas is eliminated?
Nothing's changed about our view here, that we don't support a ceasefire at this time. And there's no change to that because we don't believe that benefits anybody but Hamas right now. We do continue to support humanitarian pauses, but not a general ceasefire right now. The president wasn't signaling any change at all. In fact, he was signaling very much a very consistent view that he has had since the beginning of the conflict.
Well, we've had a China question. Today, China launched a satellite over Taiwan's airspace. Yesterday, they sent 10 aircrafts, 4 ships, and 4 balloons. Some kind of weird 12 days of Christmas. What is the White House's message to China for doing this 4 days ahead of a major election in Taiwan?
I think these actions raise questions in our mind about what the intent here is. You mentioned coincidental here in timing to the election. I have proof that that's what's driving it, but it sure does raise interesting questions, doesn't it, about what their intentions are, what their goals are with this activity. I'll tell you this: we believe that the democratic institutions of Taiwan need to be respected. We want to see a free and fair and transparent election, and we're willing and standing by to work with whoever the people of Taiwan elect into their government.
I've got another one not about the defense secretary, if you want to take it.
None of your questions have been about the defense secretary.
Burundi's president recently called for gay people to be stoned to death. In light of the administration's moves against Uganda for passing a really hateful law against gay people, are you mulling any actions against the government of Burundi for these hateful statements?
I don't have any decisions to speak to today, but obviously that is that clearly would be a horrific undertaking, a horrific way of punishing people for something they shouldn't be punished for, and we'll see where this goes. But I think it's very clear, should be clear to the people in the government of Burundi and all over the African continent how seriously we take the issue of civil and human rights.
Yeah, so more than 100 journalists have been killed in Gaza by Israel. Isn't it perhaps contradictory or harmful for the U.S. that defends free speech to keep financing and giving arms to Israel when they're committing these crimes against journalists?
Your question presumes that they are deliberately, maliciously going out to kill journalists, and we've seen no indication that they have done that. We continue to stand by the protection of journalists that are anywhere in the world, certainly covering conflict. Journalists and their jobs and their ability to report needs to be protected by any nation waging war, and we've been very, very consistent on that.
But they're not allowing international press in Gaza.
Well, as I said, I'm not aware of that report, so I'll go back and look and see what we know about that.
Many of our news outlets, right? I mean, it's a number of international news outlets.
I know, but I don't know when you submit a request to go somewhere. It's not like it comes through me. So I take the question. It's a fair one. Let me find out about it. Let's find out what the ground truth is here.
Yeah, Peter.
Come back to the December 22nd procedure that the secretary had. Did the White House, he was put under general anesthesia at that time, he was not last week. Did the White House know about that procedure, even if we didn't know what it was specifically for? Did he know at that time he was undergoing a procedure on that day?
No.
Okay, and when you said that the doctors used the phrase elective in their statement, the State of the Emergency does not use the word elective. And I wonder whether you think then that means the use of that to describe it last week by the Pentagon was fully transparent. The doctors described something that does not sound elective.
Oh, well, then that's my mistake. I thought that was in the doctor's statement. Again, I'd refer you to the Pentagon on that. I'm not at liberty. I'm not a medical expert, Peter. I can't.
You're a communications expert, and you know what elective procedure implies to the public that might not sound like what we're now being told.
Again, I'd refer you to the Pentagon.
Does the president believe that there ought to be any consequences for any DoD officials who knew about the condition of Secretary Austin but did not report that information?
That's going to be up to Pentagon leadership to decide.
Well, what does the president believe? I mean, he's the commander-in-chief.
The president believes that Secretary Austin should get the appropriate care that he needs to get better so he can get back at work at the Pentagon. He believes we ought to learn from this, both in terms of notification and about transparency to the American people. We're gonna do what we have to do. As Karine said, we're also going to take steps here at the White House to make sure that we have a good, tight alignment across the interagency about notification procedures on delegation of authorities. That's what the president wants to focus
in
on.
terms of accountability for those who might not have shared that information with the White House. It's not their DoD, it's the taxpayers.
It is the taxpayers' DoD, and it's for the Defense Department leadership to take a look at that and see what they want to do in terms of accountability. The Secretary of Defense himself took full responsibility in his statement over the weekend. I mean, he had put it on his shoulders.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Just another question, because I'm not in the clear about that. By not notifying the White House on December 22 that he was going under general anesthesia, did Secretary Austin violate existing procedures, or was that in accordance with existing procedures? What happened?
Like I said yesterday, I mean, there's an expectation that if a cabinet officer becomes hospitalized and for whatever reason, can't continue to perform the duties even temporarily, there's an expectation that will be notified up the chain of command to the commander-in-chief. That there's an expectation that would be passed up the chain of command.
Is the Pentagon reviewing the security clearance of Elon Musk after these new allegations of drug use, which would obviously violate his agreement?
You'd have to talk to the Defense Department on that.
And a second question on Hezbollah. Israel now says that time is running out for a diplomatic resolution with Hezbollah. Is that how the U.S. sees it, that time is running out?
For Hezbollah?
To reach a diplomatic resolution with them.
Look, there's always time for diplomacy. And I think you've seen us work hard at that. Secretary Blinken's in the region now. Other officials here from the National Security Council have traveled over there. We believe there's always time for diplomatic resolutions.
One more? We went long, guys. I don't know if there's anything else you guys have in mind, but go ahead.
Thanks, Karine. President Trump's lawyers today asserted that he should be immune from prosecution. What is President Biden's opinion of the Constitution on this matter? Should presidents be immune for official actions?
So look, I get why you're asking the question. I see why you're asking the question. We're going to be really careful here, given that there is an ongoing case. So not going to comment. Got to be super careful. And we don't normally comment on an ongoing legal case or make statements that could impact, right, that particular ongoing case. Also, that doesn't even involve the White House. So I'm just going to be super careful. I would have to refer you to Department of Justice. Don't want to get into the middle of this.
Sticking with former President Trump, he also said in an interview yesterday that he hopes that if there is an economic downturn, that it'll happen in the next 12 months, and I'm wondering if the White House has any reaction to that.
So I'm going to be careful, as we all know, that he is a candidate in this 2024 election. So what I will say is that consumer sentiment, as you all know from the data that came out at the end of last year, is surging and inflation is falling. And I think that matters. And all the more reason that we continue to make sure that Bidenomics, continue to move forward Bidenomics. And we've seen how historically the success of the economic growth that we've seen. When you think about the 14 million jobs, unemployment is at under 4%. Obviously, there's wages are up, right, which is incredibly important. And so look, one of the things I will say is that the cost reduction momentum over the volatility, right, if you think about Maganomics, which economists warn would worsen inflation with tax giveaways to rich special interests. Another thing I would say is that, look, when it comes to a commander-in-chief's duty, they're not supposed to wish an economic downturn. They're supposed to make sure that we put the American people first. That is what a commander-in-chief is supposed to do. They're not supposed to hope that American families suffer. That's not what a commander-in-chief is supposed to do. They're supposed to put forward an economic plan that helps all Americans. And so, it is clearly unacceptable and shameful, and what Republicans officials should hope for, they should hope for that we continue the economic progress that this president has made.
And then just one more clarification on Secretary Austin. So when Jake Sullivan was informed on Thursday, who informed him?
It was Jake Sullivan, and the Chief of Staff informed the president. Are you asking who informed?
I'm asking who from the Pentagon told Jake Sullivan?
Oh, I don't have that. I don't have the timeline or the name of the individuals that may have informed Jake Sullivan. What I can tell you is Jake Sullivan was informed by the Pentagon last Thursday, and from there they were able to inform the president. They, meaning the Chief of Staff and the National Security Advisor, informed the president. I don't have who actually told the National Security Advisor.
And did whoever at the Pentagon informed Jake Sullivan tell him at that time that they regretted the delay or give any explanation for the delay?
I get the question. I just don't have specifics on what was actually communicated in that conversation. What I can tell you is that's when National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was certainly informed about Secretary Austin's hospitalization, but I just don't have anything further on specifics of that conversation. I can also share with you, as we've had many times, is that the president was informed thereafter.
Has Secretary Austin apologized to the president?
I don't have any specifics into their conversation. All I can, as you know, as we've let all of you know, that they had a conversation on Saturday, the president and the secretary. I just don't have any details into what was discussed specifically. The president, as I said moments ago at the top of this briefing, the president obviously wishes the secretary well and hopes he has a speedy recovery and wants to see him back, obviously back at the Pentagon.
Karine, any reaction to Michelle Obama saying in an interview that she's terrified about the potential results of the election?
Look, I want to be careful. Again, we're talking about upcoming election this year, so don't want to comment on that. Obviously, we're going to let the former First Lady speak for herself. What I can tell you is that she obviously supports the agenda, this president's agenda, President Biden's agenda, and how we're moving forward in making sure that we have an economy that works for all, and moving forward certainly on implementing some of these important key historic legislation that the president was able to pass. But I'm not going to comment specifically on what she stated.
How close are you to a border security deal?
So, as I stated yesterday, when we were on Air Force One headed to South Carolina, look, the president continues to believe that we need to get to a bipartisan agreement to really deal with the border security issue. There has been a productive conversation on the Senate side, Republicans and Democrats, so we are hopeful. This is a president that is optimistic, as you know. We are hopeful that we will get to a bipartisan agreement. I know one of the negotiators, as I stated yesterday, said that would be likely to have some text this week. And so, look, this is a negotiation process. It is a bipartisan one. We appreciate that conversation. The president understands what is happening at the border is something that's been happening for decades, and we need to address it, which is why, again, why he put the first piece of legislation when he walked into the administration was to be on a comprehensive immigration and to deal with that issue.
Has the president been getting briefed on the Alaska Airlines?
So I want to... No, I know exactly what you're talking about. So first of all, we are glad to have seen that we're relieved that all passengers and crew are safe. The FAA's priority is always keeping Americans safe. That is most important. And in that spirit, these particular Boeing aircraft will remain grounded until operators complete enhanced inspections. The FAA will continue to support the National Transportation Safety Board's investigation into Alaska Airlines Flight 1282. The NTSB is in charge, obviously, as you all know, in investigating these types of investigation, and I would certainly point you to them on any updates on this particular investigation. The President, obviously, is going to continue to be updated on these things.
Does the White House primarily see this as a Boeing issue or an FAA issue?
So, look, what I can say is FAA certainly sees this as a priority to make sure that we're keeping Americans safe. That is certainly their approach here and what they believe how we need to move forward. Obviously, the Boeing aircraft, there's going to be an investigation on these Boeing aircraft. That's why they're going to be grounded. We don't know yet, right? We have to do an investigation to see exactly what occurred here, but they're going to ground them out of abundance of precaution and safety for the American people to make sure that we see to enhance inspection and to see exactly what occurred. So I don't want to get ahead of that, but they're taking, obviously, extra precautions here.
Would President Biden tell the American people that they should feel safe flying?
I think the American people should feel safe flying. Like I said, FAA's #1 priority is the safety of Americans. I think by the fact that these Boeing aircrafts are going to be grounded is important, right? That is taking the safety of Americans first, and FAA's, that's their main priority, is to making sure that occurred.
So he believes it is safe to fly now?
Yes, he believes it is safe to fly, but obviously FAA is going to do everything that they can to make sure that American people, American families are safe. Go ahead, Karen.
When the White House found out last Thursday that the Secretary was in the hospital, did somebody ask the Pentagon why and not get an answer from the Pentagon?
I don't have any specifics to share. What we know, what we can tell you is that, as you know, the Pentagon is going to do a review on their process, and that is something obviously we welcome, a 30-day review, and that's what we want to see, and we'll get a sense of how the process went, and so. That's something that obviously is important. And you saw, as I stated at the top, the Chief of Staff put a memo that went to agencies on making sure that we take a good look at the process here. But
beyond the process, just from a human aspect of this, when Jake Sullivan and then Jeff Zients and then the President here that Secretary Austin's in the hospital, didn't they ask why is he in the hospital? How did the President not know until this morning that it was cancer? How did 5 days go without knowing the diagnosis?
That is something that we're trying to find.
Not give an answer.
No, I hear you, but that is something that we are going to get a sense of this process, right? That's why they're going to do a review. That's why the Pentagon's going to do a review. That's why the Chief of Staff put out a memo to the cabinets on protocols here to get a sense of how they've been moving with this process and how we're going to continue to move forward. We do not want this to happen again, obviously, but we're going to get a better sense once the Pentagon does the 30-day review to see how this occurred. Obviously, this is not something we want to see. In the meantime, we want to make sure that Secretary Austin gets back on his feet and recovers, and I think that's really important too.
You see what I mean? Just like kind of on a human level. And the President here is
Karen,
in the hospital
Karen, I totally understand.
I
totally understand the question.
We're going to review this with a process.
I totally understand the question. I get it. I get you're wanting to know what was the reaction, the emotional reaction of folks here in kind of the chain of command, right? Once they learned about the Secretary's hospitalization. I get the question. I don't have reactions, right? Emotional reactions to how folks here felt when they learned about this. I just can't speak to that. What I can speak to is that we want to make sure that we have a process, protocols, robust protocols, because we've always said transparency is at the center of this administration. We want to make sure how these agencies move forward, that there's a robust protocol in place, and that's what we're asking. That's why the Chief of Staff, Zients, sent a memo to agencies, so we have a sense of how are they going to move forward with these types of situations or issues. And again, Pentagon is going to do their review. They announced that yesterday. It's going to be a 30-day review, and we'll have a better sense of the timeline here and what happened, what occurred. Ed?
Yeah, thanks, Karine. When will the president hold another solo news conference?
I don't have anything to preview at this time.
On communications within the administration, the last cabinet meeting was 3 months ago. So does the president know where his cabinet members are and what they're doing?
The president is in regular touch, and not just the president. Obviously, there are folks here, whether it's the Office of Cabinet Affairs, other folks here in the White House that is in regular touch with certainly leaders of the different cabinets on a regular basis. And I just don't have anything else to share. But you know, the president, obviously this is his cabinet and talks to them on a regular basis. I just don't have a specific timeline or specifics on when that happens.
On the Alaskan Airlines flight, we've all seen those pictures. Where's the transportation secretary? Shouldn't he be out reassuring Americans that it's safe to travel?
Well, you saw the secretary for weeks and days talking about how how the airlines were being held to account, and how we were in a different place certainly than we were last year during the holiday seasons. And we saw the secretary out there pretty in a robust way. And so look, the secretary, I'm sure I can speak for him right now and say that of course he wants to make sure Americans feel safe flying. That is certainly part of his responsibility, and so he certainly can speak to that himself. But he has been very, very clear about that. Secretary has been very clear about that over the past 3 years of this administration, making sure that there is safety, that we meet those safety protocols, Americans feel safe flying, and that is the #1 priority, certainly of FAA.
One more on the economy, if I could. JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon told Fox Business that the extra COVID assistance runs out in 2024, higher credit card balances. He says the chances of a recession are higher than a soft landing. How concerned is the president of recession?
Look, I appreciate the question. I'm actually glad you asked the question because, look, last year forecasters said with 100% certainty that there would be a recession. 100% certainty. That's what you heard over and over and over last year. That didn't happen. And the president never thought that we needed to have a recession to bring inflation down. He never thought that. And he was right. And just a couple of things. I know you like data. 2.7 million jobs created last year, more than any year under the previous administration. Unemployment below 4% for 23 months in a row, and the longest stretch in over 50 years. Inflation fell to 2% over the last 6 months, and wages and wealth are higher than before the pandemic. And that is not consistent with a recession. Remember, and you were asking me this question over and over again. They said there was going to be a recession. They said there was going to be a recession, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen. So I will quote Secretary Yellen here, what she said yesterday, which is, what we're seeing now, I think we can describe as a soft landing. Okay, go ahead.
Can you give us any information about what's on tap for tomorrow?
I don't have anything to preview. I'm sure the team will be sending out our regular, what the next day is going to look like for the president. Just don't have anything to preview for tomorrow. I just previewed what the president's going to certainly be doing on Friday, going to Allentown, and we'll have more on that as well. So I'll just leave it there. I'm going to try and, there's some folks in the back that I haven't called.
Yes. Including the ones you love, quote, so much.
All right, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry, James. I've got
my other favorite person.
I've got 2 questions.
Yeah.
The first one, the first son's art dealer today was testifying on the Hill, and he said that he did not have any talks with White House officials about setting up a supposed agreement to ensure that the buyers' IDs were anonymous, and that in fact many of the IDs were known. There was reporting during the president's first year in office that some White House officials were engaged in setting up this supposed agreement. Could you just clarify what the case was?
I'm just not going to comment from here. I would refer you to my colleagues at the White House White House legal office. I just don't have anything to share.
The second one, just a plug for a request for Ian Sams to perhaps take questions one day.
Well, you have full access. You have access to Ian Sams. He's very good at responding to all of you and taking your questions. So, you know, I think that's important. He's been very, very good at connecting with everyone in this room who has questions like you have about anything that is related to what you just asked.
My second question.
Third question.
Well, my second question is that we have new reporting that the mayor of Kiev, the sitting mayor Vitaly Klitschko, was involved with a business entity called Burisma Geothermal that was formerly chaired by the first son when he was the second son. The president met with the mayor multiple times, of course, over the years, and I was hoping that you could say whether the president knew about this business relationship during their meetings.
I would refer you to the White House counsel's office. Go ahead, James.
Thank you very much, Karine. With respect to the incident involving Secretary Austin, from your statements and those of Admiral Kirby, we learned today that President Biden expresses full faith and confidence in this cabinet officer, even though neither the president nor anyone else on his staff yet knows why Secretary Austin violated the existing rules and withheld this information. Is it the posture of the president that Secretary Austin's motivation is irrelevant to the president's estimation of him in this incident?
What I will say is, and we have said this many times, is that Secretary Austin put out a statement taking full responsibility of what has unfolded over the last couple of days, and the president appreciates that. And I have the statement right in front of me, but I'm sure you've seen it. And one of the things that's in here, he said, is I also understand the media concerns about transparency. And I recognize I could have done a better job ensuring the public was appropriately informed. I commit to doing better. But it is important to say this is my medical procedure, and I take full responsibility for my decisions about disclosure. So, Secretary took full responsibility. I think that is important to note. We appreciate that he's taken full responsibility. And one of the things that I've stated multiple times at this podium in the past couple of minutes is that the Pentagon is going to do a full review. We're going to let that review happen. It's going to take about 30 days, as they stated in their memo. And also we're going to take extra steps here, as we've stated with the memo, as I've stated with the memo that the Chief of Staff sent out to agencies.
Just to follow on this before I pose an unrelated second question, the motivations on the part of the Secretary for doing this are unknown to the President. And you're telling us there's going to be a 30-day review, et cetera. Shouldn't the expression of full faith and confidence in this cabinet officer await the results of that investigation? And also, isn't it a key piece of information for the President to know why Secretary Austin did this before he expresses full faith and confidence in
I
it?
think one of the things that's so important, and we don't see this enough in today's world, is for someone to take responsibility. Is for someone to actually say, I made a mistake and I take full responsibility. And I think that's important here. I'm not going to speak to that. I'm going to speak to the action of taking responsibility here, and I think that's important. And the president appreciates that. And the admiral laid out some of the things or actions and that the secretary has taken over the last 2 years that has been very helpful, and that has really played into his leadership as Secretary of the Defense. And so he has done a really a stellar job in that position. The president appreciates the job that he's done, and he's taken responsibility, and I think that's important here as well.
On this event Friday in Allentown, Pennsylvania, that you just disclosed to us, you've told us that it's going to be a speech about Bidenomics. How ought the so-called ordinary American at home to distinguish between official events and political events in this season? I've done this long enough to know that the president's remarks in Allentown on Friday are going to sound an awful lot like a campaign appearance. So what distinguishes an official event from a campaign event at this point?
I mean, we've been very clear. When there's been a campaign event, I've said it's a campaign event, and you have to go to the campaign, right, to get information. And usually a campaign event comes from the campaign. And so that's very clear. That is very clear. And so I don't know how else we could be more clearer than that. And we'll have more on what Friday will look like, and we will certainly share that with all of you. And we've been clear. Campaign event comes from the campaign. They lead those events. They speak to those events. And we have been very careful to let that live with the campaign.
But the answer you've given me suggests that the same event can transpire with exactly the same words and actions. Hang on, twice in a row, identically. But if one is organized by the White House, it's an official event, and if one is organized by the campaign, that's a campaign event.
So I want to be very clear here. What we're doing has been done by other presidents. It really, when there's a re-election for a president, there tends to be a campaign event and there tends to be an official event. That is not unusual. The way that we have moved forward with this process over the last couple of weeks, right, as we're in 2024, we're not doing anything different. We're not doing anything new. This is a protocol that has been existing for some time. So I'm just not going to get into go down a rabbit hole with you. We're not doing anything different. We're being very clear and following the protocol. I'm going to move around. I'm being pulled here, but go ahead.
Tomorrow, House Republicans plan to hold an impeachment hearing against Mayorkas. What's the White House response to that?
Look, I've spoken to this many times, and I've said before, the House Republicans are playing political games instead of doing their jobs. That's what they're doing. And it's really shameful. It's really shameful that this is how they choose to what they choose to focus on. Truly. What the American people want to see is Congress to deliver, and House Republicans continue to do these political stunts, and they want to play political games. And so it is shameful. What we want to see, what Americans want to see, is real results to the issues that American people have across the country.
And any more details you can provide on the sticking points right now in the border talks? Parole has been mentioned by negotiators.
No, I totally get the question. Not going to get ahead of the negotiators. I'm going to let them have those conversations. Obviously, if I say anything, then I'm stepping into their process, and we don't want to do that. It is what we have said is we believe that process is headed in the right direction, and we appreciate that both Republicans and Democrats are coming together and trying to find a solution to what we see at the border. And the president has always said we need to see a bipartisan agreement on an issue that has existed for decades. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.